Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the quarterly EMS cohort call. Today's topic is quality improvement for rural EMS. Today we have Sarah Brinkman joining us, who will present on this. And this message or this webinar is being recorded for future playback. So if you know somebody who is not here, or if you want to reference it in the future, feel free to do that. If you'll give us about a week to get the recording posted, we will send out an email letting you know when it's available. We also have a few polling questions to answer. Because this is a small group, I can see exactly which one of you have answered and have not, but can't tie your answers to Zol. So please take a second to answer those if you get a chance. And then, of course, if you need closed captioning or anything, we can turn those on at the bottom. So with that, I do want to see if there's any questions or comments or any concerns before we kick it off to Sarah, who will present. I think we do have time at the end for some questions and open discussion. So please feel free to put in the chat if you have a question, or raise your hand, or just save it to the end. Happy to reference back and get those questions answered for you. And so with that, Sarah, I will hand it over to you. I do have your backup slides and stuff if you need me to pull those up. So
hello, everyone. As Matt mentioned, I'm Sarah Brinkman. Many of you I know, some of you I don't, and I actually might be kind of selfish and start by asking you all to introduce yourselves because I haven't had a chance to interact with all of you. But I will give you a little bit of background about who I am, who I'm with, why I'm here, and then maybe have you all do kind of a round of introductions so I can get a sense of who's in the room and what your role is. And Matt mentioned that there will be time at the end for questions. Please just unmute and talk with me throughout. You're a small enough group for one, and regardless, I'm an informal presenter and really appreciate interaction and engagement. I think everybody gets more out of it that way, and then you don't have to listen to me drone on for half an hour to 45 minutes. So I'm here today to talk to you about our quality improvement basics course for rural EMS that we're really excited to be launching here very, very shortly. And I'll give you a little bit of background about what's taken us so long to get this off the ground. But I'll start by telling you that I work at Stratus Health. I'm fairly confident that most of you have heard of Stratus Health. We're an independent nonprofit. We're based in Minnesota. We work really at the intersection of research, policy, and practice, leading collaboration and innovation to improve healthcare quality and safety and equity. And we have a particularly long history of working with rural providers, including critical access hospitals and the FLEX program nationally. And I'm here today in Stratus Health's capacity, serving as the Rural Quality Improvement Technical Assistance Center. So our KETA is our acronym, just to add another acronym to the list. We're funded through the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy to work with, in partnership with F4HP, the folks at TASC, the folks at the FLEX monitoring team, and others, specifically focusing on improving quality and health outcomes. So really working with the FLEX programs on the kind of more on the MBQIP side. So we haven't had as much of a role in EMS, which is why I think some of your names aren't as familiar to me and I may not be familiar to you. So with that, I'm going to pause and I'm actually going to stop my share and ask if folks would be willing to do just kind of a round robin popcorn style introduction, like your name, your organization, your role, and then hand it off to someone else and we can keep going. If you're willing to turn your camera on, it's nice to see faces and names together. We'd really appreciate that. And then we can go back and I'll get back into some more of the content. So maybe Jill, if I could ask you to start us off.
Sure. I'm Jill Bullock. I am the FLEX coordinator for the Arizona Center for Rural Health. I'm also the associate director at the Arizona Center for Rural Health. And I want to hand this off to Justin Lara, who's brand new with our EMS project. He's part of the rural emergency. It's under the University of Arizona, but it's not under our Center for Rural Health that's doing the rural emergency. I can't remember. Go ahead, Justin.
Medical research.
Thank you.
So yes, I'm Justin Lara and I work with the University of Arizona in the Department of Emergency Medicine for research. And I am the research coordinator / scientific analysis / program manager, however it's identified as, but that's my role.
And for those of you who knew Eileen, Justin took over for Eileen Hardcastle.
Well, I'll jump in since it's Arizona. And Joyce Hospodar, I'm the Senior Advisor Rural Programs here at the Center for Rural Health, and been here quite a number of years and worked with Jill on the Flex program and very active with EMS and trauma around the state. And so do a lot with the EMS, with the Bureau of EMS and Trauma. We have projects with that. In fact, with the Research Center, we have an FR CARA, a new SAMHSA grant, 4-year grant. So lot on EMS. Then I'll go to Andrea. Hey, Andrea.
Joyce. Hi, thanks for the introduction, Joyce. My name's Andrea Bass. I am the EMS Programs Manager with the Michigan Center for Rural Health, which is our state office of rural health here in Michigan. And I will send it off to Martina.
All good. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Jasmine Hendrickson, Program Manager here out of New Mexico in the Office of Primary Care and Rural Health, and just help to oversee the 4 different federal grants that we have in our program. Martina's there really doing the hard work, and Donnie doing all that hard work. They just keep me out of trouble. That's really it. So I can stay out of trouble. So thanks, everybody.
Well, Donnie, maybe we'll throw it over to you then.
So I'm Donnie Roberts. I'm actually the director of EMS Regions 1 and 3, which is 2/3 of New Mexico. And I'm a retired firefighter paramedic, and now I do a lot of data stuff for the state. So,
hey everybody, I'm Lindsay Narlock. I work for the North Dakota EMS Association, which is a partner with the Center for Rural Health here in North Dakota. And I feel like I've known about this project for a long time because Nick Newdell is one of our subject matter experts. So,
hi, I'm Felicia Alvarez with the Utah EMS and Preparedness Office. I'm the EMS data manager, and my camera, I have a new computer, my camera won't turn on for whatever reason. I turn it on and just like a black screen, so that could be good. I will go next to my supervisor, Matt Plendle.
Thanks, Felicia.
My name is Matt Blundell, work for Utah EMS Preparedness, and I oversee the information systems for our office. Thanks. I'll pass it on to Adam.
Hi, everyone. I am Adam Rovang. I am the EMS epidemiologist with the Washington State Department of Health, and I'll pass it off to Jeff Sinanian.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Sinanian. I'm with the Washington Department of Health, and I'm in various roles with the WIMSIS program, so the data repository for EMS data, and support education and stuff like that.
Thank you all for humoring me. Martina, I'm sorry that we weren't able to get your volume to work. Please chat in if you have questions or comments along the way so that we can see those. I'm sure Matt will help me kind of track on that if I don't catch it in real time. And Andrea and anyone else that was at the EMS conference session that I did, a lot of this is going to be repeat for you all, but I did include some additional contexting pieces that I think might be helpful from a Flex program perspective versus from the individual user perspective. So what we are planning to cover today, the objectives are that after this session, you will be able to discuss the Rural EMS QI Basics course and the resources within it that are available to learn about QI for rural ambulance services. That you'll just be able to describe in general how the course is organized and the target audience for each level, and that level concept will make sense when we get into the content. That you'll be able to give examples of how Flex programs can apply concepts from the course to the work that you all do in rural EMS program, in your rural EMS program area of Flex. So a little bit of background about this. Nick's name came up. He was my partner in crime in putting this together. So F4HP awarded us some supplemental funds under our ARKITA contract to develop a free resource to support rural EMS quality training needs. And the intent was to build off of an existing quality improvement basics course that Stratus Health built with F4HP funds for broader audience, but to have it be kind of targeted towards rural EMS providers with some rural EMS specific examples of quality improvement initiatives, as well as just taking into account the different audiences that make up a rural EMS provider group. So we'll talk about that a bit. And then, as I mentioned, we subcontracted with Nick Nadell as our EMS subject matter expert from the Paramedic Foundation. So some of you might be familiar with the general QI basics course that Stratus Health put together. We originally launched that course in the spring of 2019. So at the time that we launched it, we were pretty excited to be able to kind of boil down quality improvement content into 11 didactic modules that we did with slide decks and voiceovers, and they ranged in length from 11 to 46 minutes. 46 was on the high end, and we wanted to keep them shorter, but we felt like that was still doable. At the time, we created 10 editable tools and templates, and we also developed over time a facilitator guide and a sample course syllabus so that if folks wanted to go through the content as a cohort, they would have kind of a framing for how to do that. So that launched in the spring of 2019, and then in the spring of 2020, COVID hit, and since then, the way that folks interact and engage with online educational content has changed dramatically. A voiceover to PowerPoint slides is kind of old news, and 45 minutes is out of the realm of possibility for folks to expect that they're going to spend that much time actually engaging with content. So that's a little bit of background context for what I'm going to talk about in terms of what we're developing and planning to roll out here within the next month or so as a replacement. So I should say on the right hand side of the screen, you'll see this was our original kind of model. We had the modules are represented in each of the circles around the edge as well as in the center. So we had foundational concepts and the model for improvement and PDSA as the center of our model, with then these other concepts making up individual modules within the course. So we never felt quite contented with this infographic because although we went with circular, it still seems to imply that there's some sort of order to quality improvement when really it's all interconnected and interwoven and it's iterative. And so we decided last year around the time that we were getting ready to roll out the EMS content that we really needed to take a look at our QI basics course and do a bit of a refresh. So we launched our refresh last year, and we're planning on launching the final content this spring, by the end of this spring. And you can see on the right, that's our new infographic, and the intent here is to try to recognize the interconnectedness of all of the pieces of the QI basics course that are available. We took the 11 modules that were longer and boiled them down into more modules that are shorter. So we have 23 didactic modules that are organized into 5 sections. We have an introduction to quality improvement, team concepts and communication, organizational culture and change management, QI processes, and data to support quality improvement. But each of the modules we're aiming for them to be no more than 10 to 15 minutes in length. So the idea is that folks could get these in kind of bite-sized content. They could watch them all back to back to back if they have the capacity and time to do them, but hopefully the length won't preclude folks from engaging with the information. We were able to add some new tools and combine some other tools. And so we're ending up with 9 editable tools and templates that will be coming out with this refresh. And we just updated with a fresh look and feel, some more engaging visuals. The other thing that's happened since spring of 2019 is that Stratus Health did a brand update. So we needed to update all of the colors and all of that kind of stuff too within the course content. So the Rural EMS Basics course is going to be all of the content from the QI Basics course, the refresh version that's forthcoming, organized into 3 suggested levels of engagement based on role, and then with contextualized EMS examples. So when I talk about the 3 suggested levels based on role, what we did was from those 5 areas that I mentioned before, we had data, we had change management, we had quality improvement processes, those types of things. We've taken them and we've kind of broken them into almost like a beginner, intermediate, and advanced level, what we're calling improvement awareness, improvement implementation, and improvement leader. And if you are an improvement leader, you should start by doing the improvement awareness and the improvement implementation before you move on to the improvement leader. They build on each other. So improvement awareness is meant to be appropriate for all EMS providers and explains why we engage in quality improvement, what it can mean for your organization, for your community, and for your patients. So this is really getting at the, what do we even mean by quality improvement? Why would I want to be involved in it? Improvement implementation it moves on to the next level, which is providing more detail and training for people who want to understand how to engage in quality improvement projects that are led by others. So this is where you're not necessarily leading a project, but you are engaged and have an important role in implementing a quality improvement project. And then finally, improvement leader gets really more into the nuts and bolts of the how to lead a quality improvement initiative and all of the tools and models and templates that can be useful in that endeavor. So it's more directed towards those with the motivation or desire to lead others in implementing improvement initiatives. So to get just a little bit further into what each of those entails within the improvement awareness category, there are just two short modules, 10 to 15 minutes each. One is an introduction to quality improvement, and one is about health equity and quality improvement. So as an example of the type of content that would be included in that will be included in that overview is just our introduction of what is quality improvement. So here you can see a representation of the care gap that exists between knowledge and practice. And we are able to close that gap by utilizing quality improvement. So we're trying to identify opportunities for improvement where there's a gap between what we know from research and practice and how we actually deliver care. And in healthcare, we're continually learning new and better ways to improve the health of the population and delivery of care to individuals. But there's almost always a delay in translating that into practice. And so closing the gap between what we know and what we do is the essential role of quality improvement. So this is an example of the type of content that will be provided to folks who engage with that introduction to quality improvement course. Moving on to the second level is the improvement implementation. So in this level, this is more about the kind of nuts and bolts of how you engage in quality improvement. This is processes and systems, building your quality improvement team, communication techniques, the model for improvement in PDSA, and data basics and collection. So in here, an example of the type of content that folks will be engaging with that I think is really useful for flex programs to understand, and you all either you or members of your team recently engaged specifically in an effort to collect information on a quality improvement initiative using the model for improvement in PDSA as the documentation and implementation approach. So in the model for improvement, participants will learn about in this level, participants will learn about the model for improvement in PDSA. For those who aren't familiar, the model for improvement answers these top 3 questions. What are we trying to accomplish? How will we know that change is an improvement? And what change can we make that will result in an improvement? And those answers are used to inform the plan, do, study, act cycle, where we plan an initiative, we implement the initiative, we study the outcomes from the initiative, and then based on the outcomes, we decide how to act. Are we going to adapt, adopt, or abandon the approach that we took? So in this module, we'll go much further in depth into how to go about implementing the model for improvement in PDSA to inform quality improvement efforts. And then we get to the improvement leader level, and you can see this is where things kind of really blow up. There's a lot of content to cover here. If you're going to be leading implementation of improvement efforts within a rural EMS environment, it's important to understand project teams and leadership, meeting facilitation, communication, charters and work plans. We go pretty in depth into organizational culture and change management, why people do what they do and how we can help them move in a different direction if need be. Prioritizing your quality improvement efforts, identifying root causes through root cause analysis, process mapping and swim lane mapping to be able to help inform processes, data analysis and display methods, just taking that data content a step further to be able to utilize the data that is collected. So an example of some of the content that's included here, particularly around organizational culture and change management, is the idea of the switch model for change. We actually go through 4 4 different change management models that we've highlighted in the course, and this is one of them. So the switch model for change really recognizes that it's hard to make lasting change in our companies, in our communities, in our lives, in our organizations, because the conflict is between balancing and appealing to both our rational mind and our emotional mind, which compete for control for how we act. And so what this book really talks about is how, and this model really talks about, is how we can speak and appeal to individuals' knowledge, meaning the data, facts, the best practices, the model. So some folks really need to have the knowledge base in order to generate change. Others, we really want to make sure that we're appealing to feelings like stories, connections, meaningful goals, things that people can feel connected to, and then the skills that they need to be able to do the work, the workflow, the processes, the tools, and the training. And another way to think of knowledge, feelings, and skills is really to translate these into the head, the heart, and the hands, which is a familiar paradigm of how we approach and carry out decision-making. So for the purposes of quality improvement, the messages that we learn through this switch model, which was put forward by brothers Chip and Dan Heath, is that we want to focus on all 3 of these. So often in healthcare, we get stuck in one area. Maybe when something's not working, we tend to focus in on training and education, and that's not always the answer. We need to make sure that people understand the why in terms of their feelings. We need to know that they understand the facts. What is our baseline performance? How are others performing? Things of that nature. So really any attempt at implementing change needs to cover all 3 of these. And we talk about that within the course. So it gives folks more content and understanding of how to implement that, along with some other models of change management. And then we've built in some EMS quality examples. So throughout the QI Basics course, there are a number of different examples that are included of hospitals, of clinics, of nursing homes, and so on. We didn't have any EMS specific examples built into the original course. And so when we engaged with Nick, he was able to help us build out a couple of specific examples for EMS. One of them around lights and sirens. So knowing that Nick talks about how there has talked to me about, and I'm sure you are all familiar with, the issues around use of lights and sirens and the time it takes to respond to the location of accidents, illness, and injury, and transporting patients to their care center. But we know that it is linked with significantly higher risk of crashes and injuries and death. And so we have an example built into the EMS specific modules around lights and sirens. Another example that we have is around documenting a complete set of vital signs in a patient record. And so I actually have one of the slides from that module here is a process map that we walk through. So we talked about, Nick shared with us as we were building this out and this example. So as part of, an initial patient assessment, the responding EMS professional is going to attach the pulse ox sensor to the patient's finger and review the results, and then consider if the results match the patient's presentation. So if yes, they would enter that data into the patient encounter. And that would be the end of the process map. That would be the end of it. But if the results don't match the patient presentation, what do? So they might troubleshoot the pulse ox sensor placement and functionality, and then look at the results. And again, do they match the patient presentation? And if this time it's yes, you'd enter it and be done. But what happens if they don't again? And so one of the examples that he was giving was an EMS program that he was working with, where it turns out that there was an assumption made that because something wasn't documented, that means it wasn't done. And what actually happened was that the sensor wasn't working, but it never got reported back to the person who needed to know it to be able to fix the issue. And so repeatedly, they had patients who didn't have their pulse ox documented, and they thought that it was a training issue to tell folks you need to enter the pulse ox. And what it really was the results didn't match the patient presentation, but folks were too busy and didn't understand who they were supposed to share that information with, that the sensor wasn't working. And so here you can see that if it's not matching at the end, you don't enter the data into the chart, but you report it to the supervisor so that they can get it addressed. So this is a really simple example of process flow mapping to help identify the root cause of an issue, and instead of jumping to the the conclusion that it's an education or a compliance related issue. So I'm going to pause there. I'll give you an example of, I'll give you a little demo of what the site looks like, which is included. I did send Matt slides, but I did them just in time. So we got them right before this. I'm sure they'll share the slides with you. But I can pull up what the site looks like here in just a second and give you a little overview, but see if anybody has any questions or comments. So this is what the website looks like. The website is live, although not all of the content is available yet. So it's the Rural EMS Quality Improvement Basics site. And you can see we describe those 3 levels that I talked about: who is appropriate for the improvement awareness, the improvement implementation, the improvement leader content. We have a really basic overview of what the entire course entails, and that is available. If you want to check that out, you're welcome to go to the site and see that. I'll drop the link in the chat so you can check it out later. That one is up and running. And then each level has a little expander here. So level 1, when you expand it, you'll get into the introduction to quality improvement. You can see it's coming soon because we haven't posted all of our QI basics content yet, but once it is posted, it will be linked here. And it does take users out to a YouTube playlist, and the YouTube playlist will play in the order of how the content is presented on our page here. So if someone did just want to sit down for an hour and get through as much as they could, the next video will queue up and play through. They don't have to come back to this web page and click through again to find everything. For every one of the recorded modules, a PDF of slides and a written transcript are available if folks prefer to be able to read along or prefer reading to listening or whatever their desired mode of learning is. And then when we get down into improvement implementation is when you'll start to see that some of the tools that are discussed within each of the modules are embedded within this section. So we talk about SMART goals within the model for improvement in PDSA module. And so we have a tool around developing SMART goals that will be available here. And you can see that then within each of these sections, level 2 and level 3, we have a specific rural EMS quality improvement basics intro kind of video about this section, what you're going to learn as you go through this content and things to be thinking about from a rural EMS perspective. And then when we get to the end of the content for this particular level, there is a video about how to take some of the concepts and tools and apply them in an EMS setting in a summary format. Those rural EMS specific videos are all completed, but the in between content is forthcoming. And then level 3 will look similar, but there's a lot more in level 3. So I'll be scrolling for a while, try not to make you dizzy. There's a lot of coming soon information. And then the wrap up video here at the end that goes through some EMS specific examples with the content that was covered in that level. So some of our next steps are that we are just finishing up development of the refresh models. We've had a couple of staff members unexpectedly out of the office over the last couple of months, which has put us behind our anticipated timeline. So we apologize that things aren't out yet, but we've had a couple family emergencies come up. So we are working fast and furious to get everything finished. We'll be updating the general Stratus Health QI Basics page as well as the rural EMS QI Basics sites with those refreshed content as it is completed. And eventually we'll be developing an updated facilitator guide and sample syllabus. So again, if you wanted to convene your rural EMS providers to go through it together, or if your rural EMS providers wanted to convene their staff to go through it together, they'll have kind of a guide and template to be able to use to inform that with some suggested discussion questions and things of that nature from a learning perspective. And then we do plan to continue to develop out some rural relevant examples to tie into both the general and the rural EMS QI Basics site. So if you have examples from your EMS providers that you're working with of quality improvement initiatives that they've undertaken, we would love to hear about them so that we can create relevant and timely examples to share with others. And that's what I have for you. So I will stop my share and see what kinds of questions or comments or concerns, the good, the bad, the ugly, any thoughts that you have about what I shared with you today. Yeah, go ahead, Jill.
How have states rolled this out to their rural EMS providers? Or do you know if it's been done yet?
No, so the rural EMS specific content this is like fresh off the press and not even quite off the press because we're still working through the
Okay.
updates to the general course. So I don't know, I don't have any examples of that specifically. I think we could talk about that here, some thoughts and brainstorming around what you all would think would be a useful way of approaching it. I can tell you from the general QI basics course content that there are a number of states that have utilized that with their critical access hospitals. Some of them have done that kind of cohort based approach where they've said, not rather than just passively sharing it with them and hoping that they engage with it, pulling together a kind of affinity group or a learning collaborative and saying, sign up for this and we'll facilitate conversations with you along the way as you complete the course content. So watch these 3 modules and then we'll get together and we'll have a discussion about what you learned. And that's what the facilitator guide and the sample syllabus offer, is just a framework for how you might think of doing that. That's something that we do for a different initiative at Stratus Health that we're actually under Arquita on this for the small healthcare provider quality improvement grantees through the community-based division. We do a cohort-based learning with that content on a biannual basis. So we utilize that framework to then help you all be able to leverage it if that's of interest.
Well, I think Joyce is on off mute, so this is a project that I'm going to give her.
And Sarah, so what kind of credit do the credits, what do they earn for credit?
No, we don't have any CME tied to it at this point. So when we've convened groups, we have given them like a certificate of participation and completion for attending our live group events. And so I know for me, for example, I'm not clinical, but I have a CPHQ certification that suffices for me for that certification. It doesn't count as CME, and CME looks different in every state. So it's hard for us to do something comprehensive like that.
Can we add CME to these if we've got a way to do that?
I mean, we are certainly open to having that conversation with you. I'm not a CME expert, our comms related folks would be, but we can provide you, I mean, the transcripts are available. So all of the information is there. If someone wanted to review it and apply for it, it looks different in every state. But yeah, reach out if there's something that we can do to be helpful in that respect.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sarah, you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, but I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on what is your, I guess can you give us an example of like application for this? Like, what do you see? Who is the person? Can you visualize the person that you think would benefit the most from this and how they would use it?
Right, and that was, so the leveled approach was really Nick's brainchild. So he said, okay, if I'm working with a volunteer EMS group and I've got someone who's coming in, you know, their shifts, however many shifts they volunteer for a month, they don't need to get into all the details. They just need to know what I mean when I say quality improvement. So let's have them do level 1. So level 1 is, what is quality improvement and how is health equity tied to quality improvement? Stratus Health firmly believes that you can't achieve quality without equity. So we link those 2 things together. So but your basic level is those quality, what is quality improvement? So that little icon that I showed you of the guy crossing the bridge. So quality improvement is bridging the gap between what we know we're supposed to do and what we actually do, and making it possible for us to do what we're supposed to do. We know what best practices are. We know what we're supposed to do when we're out in the field. We're well educated in that. How do our systems support us in being able to accomplish that? So that people understand that quality improvement isn't meant to make more work. It's meant to make work easier, more efficient, more effective, to really accomplish all of those things. So that's the basic level. Then the intermediate level would be more of a kind of, you know, your everyday employee who's engaged in EMS work and might be on a quality improvement team, or might be implementing some of the efforts that the larger organization is implementing. So that would be, you know, kind of more of your frontline staff, but that aren't volunteers. So Nick was trying to, because I'm not an EMS expert, so he's kind of explaining to me rural EMS. You know, we say you've seen one car, but rural EMS really runs the gamut. I mean, you could have anything from a highly sophisticated staffed group to just, it's all local volunteers. And so this was kind of like the intermediate level as it indicates. And then the expert level would be more of the, okay, I'm the person who's responsible for quality improvement at this organization. I need to understand all of the ins and outs of how to go about implementing this, why people don't want to change, how I can help them understand why change is important, those kinds of things, how I can leverage data. So the leveled approach is really meant to be the guide to who the audience is and what they would need to know. Of course, anyone could engage in all of it if they wanted. But if you're the leader at the end of it, you have all of the tools and content at your fingertips to be able to say, okay, we're going to tackle lights and sirens. We're going to tackle vital signs. We have this issue that we've been having where we, you know, whatever our quality improvement issue is, you have all the tools available to you to then be able to implement a quality improvement initiative. Does that answer your question, Matt?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Okay.
You know, who could use it more?
Yeah. And does that make sense to all of you? I mean, it made sense to me when Nick explained it, but I'm not an EMS expert, so Felicia gave me a thumbs up.
And that's all we ask for in life, is a thumbs up from Felicia. So I have another question too. I'm just going to ask questions. If anybody else has one, just interrupt me. What is your plan? I mean, you've talked about this plan, you rolled this out. Beautiful website, by the way. I loved it. How much thought went into it. What is your plan to get this into the hands of the people that need it? Like, is it going to be us just sharing words? Are we blasting it on Facebook?
I'm going to send it to Jill and she's going to fix all the problems.
Yeah. So, or I guess not only the plan, but I guess the expectations for us in this room. What are your?
Yeah, so the distribution, so the brainchild came from Talia, said we want an EMS QI, we want quality improvement tools for EMS, for rural EMS. And Natalia connected her with us and we were able to, you know, kind of make those connections and say, well, we have this base course, and she reviewed it and said, I think that's it. And then we want to build in this EMS specific content. So the intent is that we'll have a rollout. We'll have some announcements when it's ready. This will be a group that will share it with. F4HP will share it. NOSOR will share it because we've presented at their EMS conference the last couple of years about this, that it was coming, and then this year our update that we gave on where things were at. So we'll be kind of doing a full court press to let folks know that it's out there. And then it really is, as you know, we don't have connections with rural EMS providers directly in our capacity as our Arcata or Stratus Health. We probably have a few just by happenstance, but we're really looking to get it into the hands of the folks that work with rural EMS providers.
You know, I have a thought, because we do support rural trauma team development courses. How can we get this? Well, I guess it would just be working with the instructors. I mean, I think this would be really good to kind of incorporate into the rural trauma team development courses.
If anything, Jill, it's just to get those instructors to use it as an additional resource. Right?
Yeah.
I just did some certifications myself over the last few months, and at the end of every class, it was, here's some things we mentioned, here's the links to do this. And if we can get this tool into the hands of those people and ask them to use it, I think that would be very beneficial.
Agreed.
Do you have any type of course goals, Sarah? Like, hey, we want to have 100 people take this, or because that may help motivate the people in the room, right? Like, hey, we got to have 500 people take this by the end of the year.
Yeah, you know, we talked about it's been a labor of love to do the refresh. We didn't anticipate it was going to take as long as it did. Whenever you bring new people into content, they're like, but what about this? And what about that? And I want to put this here and I want to move that there. And it's like, oh, should we leave good enough alone or should we go for better? And we, of course, wanted to go for better, which has taken us longer. And at one point, someone brought up like gamification within it so that we could track on what people are learning. And I think that is a 3.0 version. We're not doing that this time. That's a great question, Joyce, about will the folks evaluate what they've received? We will be building out or intend to build out kind of a click here to give us feedback or evaluate, but we don't have, because we're not tying it to CMEs, because we're not engaging with people directly, and we didn't want to put it behind like a sign-in. We didn't want to put any barriers in between folks accessing it. So we don't, it's not like you have to log in to take it. So we're not collecting information about who's completing it. But we would be very interested if there's any interest among this group or others to say, you know, like, we did it with, you know, first of all, we'd always love your feedback on the content and how it works and, you know, functions from a website layout perspective and how the course content is laid out. But if you do implement any type of group activities, we would love, you know, any feedback that you get from that as well.
I'm not going to complicate that. Maybe this is a 3.5 or 4-point version. But one thing that annoys me with like software as a service type of things, or you know, this trainings, but would may be beneficial here because it's very direct and audience is like, did you enjoy the training? Share it with a friend button. That automatic, you know, that allows you to email the, you know, generates a form email that's already generated, and you can just forward it to your coworkers. That may be an option too.
Yeah, we can look into that.
And on your suggestion, you were talking about getting feedback and you don't have it behind a wall or anything. And I apologize, I missed the very beginning of this because Zoom was updating. But maybe a consideration is just to put a poll right at the end of it that is voluntary to take, that has the questions that you want answers to. Why did you take this? Who did you take this? And that would be a way for you to collect that data without having it stuck behind, like I said, a wall.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think we would love to do that. I think what we need to think about is how we do it. So when folks are engaging, if folks have any suggestions, now this is turning into a brainstorming session to benefit me, which I very much appreciate. But so you're watching the modules, you're going to our website, and then you're clicking on a link that's taking you to YouTube. So you're not necessarily coming back to our website after you've watched a module. And I wouldn't want folks to think that they have to complete an assessment after every single module. And then you've got folks that are completing just the beginner level, the intermediate level, so we would need to think about, maybe we would do that for the intermediate and the expert or the advanced level, say, you know, at the end of the final session, say, we'd love your feedback, click here or something like that. We could figure out how to, I don't want to annoy people.
Well, or
be like, oh my God, stop asking me. I mean, we even talked about like, we shortened the videos, you know, from 45 minutes down to 10 minutes, but that means every video has an intro and an outro. And I'm like, I don't want to listen to more than 3 seconds of your intro music before you get to the next video, because if I'm just watching them in order, that's really annoying to me. So we tried to be really thoughtful about how folks might engage with it, all the ways that they might think through it. So if you have any examples of ways that you've engaged with content or that we would be hugely beneficial to us and to the end users for us to collect their feedback and be able to incorporate it. So
and maybe just on the main landing page that you have where they access links, just here's a poll and whether you wanted to set one up for the entire, no matter which course you took, that might have drop downs. Did you take course 1, 2, or 3?
Sure.
Or a poll link for each one. Again, we know how often people actually respond to polls, but that would be and then you've got to have somebody to manage the poll on the backside, which I understand is also
that's the easy part for me. Yeah. I can get that figured out.
But that way it would be readily available. It would be clear what their expectations are. And you're right, even if they don't come back to your page at some point, they just have this one link. If you take, maybe they only take part of a course, say, did you only take part of the course when you think you're complete, would you consider taking this poll, because it would help us? And why does it help you? Because, you know, we got to do our effective domains and get people engaged on why it's important.
Right.
And it would be interesting to be able to tie like training usage to outcome measurement. Like, hey, did we have an increase? Did a bunch of people in this area take this or this state take it? oh, we also saw an outcome increase, you know, in this area. So we know it's working. That's going to be hard. Maybe that's version 8.0. I don't know. But I agree with
and I
John.
think that that's something that at the state level, if you all are pushing it, you would have more capacity to collect that, if you know, and if you have it, we would love for you to share it with us if you're willing to. So we struggle with that in attribution for all of the work that we do as Arquita, because we really we're pushing it to state flex programs as a pass through to then get to their providers. So our ability to say, hey, we did X and it resulted in Y in a community is, I mean, there's an entire alphabet in between of things that have happened, and whether any of it has to do with us or not, you know, like we would love to take credit for the things that go well and pass the buck on the things that don't, but we're so far removed. But I think if there's any interest among this group as you go forward to, you know, share that with us, or for me to check back in at some point, see how it's going, get your thoughts, I'm more than happy to do that and would love to do that.
I know this is a small group, so before you guys all cutting around as we start wrapping up, I'm going to have Patricia launch a post-assessment polling. Again, I can see how many people are in here, so I can see how many people took it. So please feel free to fill that out. We're talking about data. I mean, we just got to jump in there and say, hey, it's important to us too, for us to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of these type of webinars. So I would appreciate that. Of course, as I said earlier, recording will be made available. We'll send out the links if you thought this was valuable, which of course I did, but if you thought it was valuable to someone in your state or in your EMS groups that might be benefit from this, please make sure you share that with them. Ask us any questions that you might have. Ask Sarah any questions you might have. Ask the universe. We'll make sure the right person gets the right questions to answer to you as always. So we appreciate that. We're not necessarily wrapping up at this very moment, but wanted to get that in. And if you have more questions, feel free to stick around for a few minutes. But if you do not, feel free to check out and go to your next project. We're all busy people, so we understand your time is valuable. So we appreciate you guys being here today. Yeah, I was about to say love you, miss you, mean it, but that's normally what I say to family, but I'll say it to y'all too. Love you, miss you, mean it. So thanks for being here today, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.